Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Tuesday, which normally means it's time for, what is that? Production basics? I guess that's what that is. No, that must be a basic terminology. I have a whole actual schedule I'm trying to keep to, but I don't do that because what's a schedule? Anyway, I want to talk about drums. I have this drum beat here in this track I'm working on, which I'm going to play you this track, and you're going to think it's hilarious because it sounds nothing like anything I would do. Anyway, but I want to talk about making fat drums, making big sounding drums, because actually for like huge years when I was first starting out, getting this exact sound was just a huge chore, and it's probably not a thing that anyone actually cares about doing anymore, just because stylistically people have moved on. But whatever, it's interesting to me. So here we go. Here's the track. Who knew major keys were so fun? Anyway, these drums sound like this more or less originally. There's obviously some stuff I'm doing on in the individual land, but it's mostly light EQ work. It's also slightly misleading because these are samples that are in FL, tack kick and a tack hat. And what is this? A green dream closed hat and then a tack snare. But these are just like 808 stuff, really. Like a vaguely 909 kind of fast 808 thing. Like, this is all super basic stuff. But I actually have increased the master pitch, and I did not engage, or rather disengage, enable main pitch, which means that like this is actually this is all these are pitched up, and then some of them are pitched back down, but not all the way. So basically, these guys are all 3 semitones higher than they were originally, and this guy is only 1 semitone higher than it was originally. Because I like to turn that off. But most of everything that makes the beat what it is happens in the bus. Because I route all 4 of these guys into the thing. And like this is just what the beat looks like. It's just in the sequencer. With a couple fills every now and then. And then the effects happen. So it's interesting because this effect, this particular sort of beefing up of the drums, and I think the result doesn't really sound like the source could have possibly been this. But this ends up working out pretty great. And I used to only be able to do this if the sample, like if I found a drum loop somewhere that was already kind of like this. Because I didn't understand compression. I only vaguely understood distortion enough that I was able to make it do some of the things, but not enough the way that I wanted to. And now I can do that because I know what the hell I'm doing. And so now I'll teach you too, even though none of you are doing breakbeat. Anyway. The first effect in the stack is reverb. And this sort of makes sense if you think about it, because the drums are so dry, they have no sort of room characteristics. And like my favorite example of this of a beat like this, it's not entirely like this because it's a bit cleaner, it's not as distorted, but essentially right in the middle of the track Chateau from the movie Matrix Reloaded, there's a little break, a little drum break moment, and it's nice and like squishy, and like if it rolls, it's just a great drum break. That's you can just YouTube Matrix Reloaded Chateau, and I'll show you that whole scene, and then you can just listen to the music. It's so good. And that's the kind of thing I was trying to do. And the first step is you have to give it some room, because there is no room initially. So it's not really allowed to compress. Even if I brought all this up without the reverb, you can kind of hear like that little. There's actually a little bit of built-in reverb on some of these samples, which is kind of dumb, but you can hear that there's not any room in there at all. So the inclusion of the reverb turns it into a room, which when it's just a reverb, it doesn't sound like anything at all almost. And You don't even really. I'm using Valhalla Room for this, but you actually don't need to use this at all. And it's not just because it's like, oh, all reverbs are the same or whatever, because they're not. But a thing that would actually be a little bit more beneficial for this would be to use convolution reverb, because you open up yourself a convolver, which is in the reverb, bam, and then go and get essentially a room sound, like any of these places, like. And then you put this on there, and you turn on the reverb. And it's like whatever you're doing is in whatever that space is, which is the whole point of convolution reverb. And we're essentially building our own convolution with having a non-impulse based reverb. Although I'm pretty sure this is still impulse based reverb, it's just that it's happening in the background. Although I don't really know, because I'm not the guy that programmed these. But we're essentially building a room. Which is why now, without the effects, this kind of just sounds like it's in a room. Now, the next thing in the chain is a distortion with the wave shaper. And this is doing very light distortion. But the thing that matters is kind of what's going on down here. So obviously the big crunch, is up here. This is a big saturation. But this angle down here is making it that like the very quietest amount, like the closest to the zero crossing of the oscillation, is being kept up a bit. So even the most quiet stuff is still being kind of dragged out. So you can see how the position and the angle and like the depth, all the like pretty much everything about the axis of it being there at this point in its position changed the tone and the characteristics, the weight and the time even of the sound coming through there. So that's sort of what that does. And then there's a little bit of EQing, but this EQing is put in here before the compression, and the compression kind of matters a lot. Basically, it was responsible for how the whole thing sounds. Now, initially, I did just punch up the master and did one of these, and there's a lot of release time. I turned off elevation delay, which is the look-ahead delay for the low, mid, and high people, and also the front attack, which is look-ahead delay for the master channel. And that's because these are drums, and I want them to be in time, and I also want them to snap like perfectly in the compression. And I remember thinking, well, if you engage attack, it's supposed to allow some of the thing to come through so that you still have your transients or whatever. That's not the kind of snap I'm talking about. That's not the kind of snap I'm talking about. Especially because the way that we're doing this compression is essentially expansion. The sort of the inverse of the idea that you want to have a little bit of the attack coming through is true at this moment. So in this case, you want to essentially adhere perfectly to the transfer curve as opposed to lingering a little bit. So the release time matters, but I am also compressing sort of the lows and the mids. I'm also compressing the highs, but I'm compressing the highs a bit more regularly. This is me just bring it down. And this was actually a solution to a problem that I solved by doing other things, but then I just got used to how this sounds, so I'm leaving it there. But this guy, see how I brought it up a whole bunch, and then I brought down the post. So this brings up a lot about the mids, but it would have been too much mid, so I brought down the posts, and the mids are now, the mids are compressed, but their relative level is the same as the way before, so it fits in a little bit better. And you can, determine what you want to do here. But like, what precisely is happening here in terms of like where the splits are actually we're determined a bit more by the stereo field than anything else. The drums that I'm using are like, stupid tiny stuff, even after they're being processed. It's not really a well-defined like snare fundamental tone. This isn't like your modern kind of zomboid dubstep snares where there's just like a big old peak at the bottom there, where most of the power is coming from, and so most of the compression has to deal with that. This snare actually is more highs than anything else. So what's going on down here is that like essentially because of whenever the kick hits, there's a lot of rumbly lowness and there's a lot of reverb, which means that the stereo field is humongous. So we have to essentially determine where we want the lows to kind of be together, because really you don't want your lows to be that stereo. And then what parts we do want to be stereo because it sounds kind of cool. So that's where you want to put your split in there. That's just kind of up to you. There's not really any reason to care about that. I also turned on oversampling to get rid of interstable peaking, but that probably didn't matter at all. And it's probably just a big old CPU drain. I also spread the highs a little bit to make it a bit more stereo. Well, most of this, you can see most of my time variables are pretty large. Even this one, which looks like it's reduced. Given that this is all high frequency content, so I don't know. You're just not going to tell me what that is. Whatever. It's around 2K upwards. So that means that like 2,000 times a second. I don't know what that is in milliseconds, but it's really, really low, which means that like an 18 millisecond like release time is pretty freaking high for high frequencies. But lows and highs, and also on the master itself, they're really big time variable, like long release times, because I want that squishy, soft kind of like sucking feeling, which is all terrible buzzwords I'm always on about, but not saying. But like, observe what happens when I make it slower. Of course, it also matters for that doing on the mids too. And on the lows to give that rumbly a chance to rumble a little bit longer, which is being increased by the presence of the reverb and also the wave shaper. In the reverb itself, I've done nothing to change like where the bass multiplier is. That there's the bass crossover, and the bass multiplier determines essentially how long, or rather how much bass there is in it, and I got to change nothing, which meant that all the bass is coming through the way it's supposed to. I turned the high cut all the way up so that we have all the high frequencies, but it goes up to 15K. It's not all of them, but it's a lot of them. And then there's a post EQ to kind of even it out. And then I have a gross beat that I use exactly once. Right there. Excuse me. I made it slow. It's a lot of fun. And then that more or less makes the drums. Like, this track is weird. I don't know why I'm doing this. These are all major chords, by the way. They're all major 7s. And I think there might be a 9 in there. I don't know. It's all major though. And I just picked roots, and it works pretty great. You want to have a fun experimentation musically, just make a bunch of super major chords and then just like move them up and down in different roots. Even roots you don't think will work. Like I'm in C, but I'm not actually in C because I changed the pitch. But like I went to a minor third as a root and made that major. Like it still actually sounded kind of cool. Go figure. And then major melody. Same basic idea as writing a minor, and just doing it major. And then with a fat beat. So like the bigness of it is essentially controlled by how much reverb there is. So like when I reduce the reverb, it feels a little more manageable, and increase the reverb. So if you don't like my version of this, like you're following along, then like you can think to yourself, okay, well I want less room or more room, I want more punch, less punch. Like that's the reverb that's controlling that. The compression is also a big part in doing it as well, but because we're multi-banding it, and the sounds themselves are so ludicrously tight that it's pretty easy for it to survive even some stuff. And also, of course, distortion. So that's a lot of fun. I turned up the oversampling to 16x. That probably didn't matter much, but whenever you're distorting like hi-hats, you're gonna get a lot of aliasing. Yeah. So if you have any questions about this, please let me know. I want to remind you that this is we're coming up on the last week of my lesson sale, which is to say that on June 1st, that's when the price comes back from what it is now in the sale to regular $90 an hour. $90 an hour, which right now the sale is for $40 an hour, and it lasts until the end of May. You might think that you have to get lessons in May, but you don't have to get lessons in May. There are no lessons in May. There are no lessons in June, and lessons in July are rapidly filling up. So if you want to get lessons, you're going to have to get them, later in the year anyway. But as long as you pay for it before the end of May, then you get the sale price. That's how that works. If you have any questions about that, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.